Mexico's president has given an incredible speech calling for the freedom of imprisoned journalist Julian Assange.
Es el mejor periodista de nuestro tiempo en el mundo y ha sido muy injustamente, repito, tratado, peor que delincuente. Esto es una vergüenza para el mundo.
The president of Mexico, the first left-wing president in several decades, his name is Andrés Manuel López Obrador, known by the acronym AMLO, AMLO. He gives every morning a press conference, and he talks about the latest things that his government is doing, and he takes questions from journalists. And on the morning of June 21st, AMLO was asked about the extradition of journalist Julian Assange to the US. The British government ruled that Assange is going to be extradited, and he's facing up to 175 years in prison. So basically, life in prison. This is death, essentially a death sentence, a long, drawn-out death sentence against Julian Assange for the so-called crime of doing journalism, of publishing truthful information in public interest that exposes the crimes of the US government. And President AMLO condemned the persecution of Assange. He referred to Assange as the most important journalist, the best journalist of our day in the world. That's the exact phrase that AMLO said. The best journalist of our time in the world. He also referred to Assange as a prisoner of conscience.
Es un preso de conciencia, es injustamente tratado.
And the Mexican president reiterated his call to give political asylum to Assange, saying that Mexico's doors are open to Assange.
México le abre las puertas a Assange.
And then, in an even more incredible moment, the Mexican president, López Obrador, he actually paused his press conference to play a video, a clip of a video, which is known as the collateral murder video. This was released by Chelsea Manning, who was a U.S. whistleblower who gave these documents and videos to Julian Assange at WikiLeaks. Assange and WikiLeaks published this 2007 collateral murder video, which exposes U.S. war crimes committed in Iraq, including the killing of civilians and specifically a journalist from Reuters. So I wrote an article about this at Multipolarista.com titled Mexico's President AMLO Demands Freedom for Julian Assange, Prisoner of Conscience, and Best Journalist of Our Time. This is an incredible speech, and in a minute here, I'm going to go to the speech from AMLO. I translated it and I put subtitles on. So I'm going to cut to that in a minute here, and I'll play the most important sections of this section of the press conference that López Obrador gave on June 21st. But I also want to highlight another very important thing that López Obrador said in this. He also went out of his way to condemn U.S. government hypocrisy, which is incredible for a Mexican president. I mean, Mexico for decades, until AMLO came to power in 2018, had a series of neoliberal and right-wing U.S. puppet governments. So AMLO is really the first independent and first left-wing president of Mexico in many years, in decades. And in this press conference, he criticized U.S. government hypocrisy, saying, "Are we going to take the Statue of Liberty out of New York? Are we going to keep talking about democracy? Are we going to keep talking about the protection of human rights, of the freedom of expression?
Y las libertades. Vamos a quitar la Estatua de la Libertad de Nueva York. Vamos a seguir hablando de democracia. Vamos a seguir hablando de protección a los derechos humanos, de libertad de expresión.
And then he even said that the imprisonment of Assange is a, quote, shame for the world. The United Nations should take a stance, he said, along with all organizations that defend human rights. There cannot be silence.
Naciones Unidas debe pronunciarse. Todas las organizaciones de defensa de derechos humanos. No puede haber silencio.
So this was a really incredible speech given. And the last thing I want to say here before going to the full clip, which is 7 minutes long, I'm just going to mention that in his speech, AMLO reiterated the fact that at the end of the Donald Trump administration, in late 2020 and early 2021, AMLO wrote a letter to President Trump and pressured Trump, called on Trump to pardon Julian Assange because, of course, U.S. presidents can issue pardons. And instead of pardoning Assange, Donald Trump ignored AMLO's letter, and instead of pardoning Assange, freeing Assange, who exposed U.S. war crimes in Iraq, instead, Trump pardoned convicted war criminals from the mercenary firm Blackwater who massacred civilians in Iraq. So for me, this says everything about the priorities of the U.S. government and Donald Trump and now Joe Biden. I mean, meet the new boss, same as the old boss. Instead of pardoning this very important journalist who the Mexican president refers to as the best journalist in the world, instead of pardoning him for exposing U.S. war crimes, Trump pardoned the war criminals who murdered civilians in Iraq. So with that said, I'm now going to cut to the translation of AMLO's incredible speech.
Sí, en el caso de Julian Assange, nosotros al finalizar el gobierno del presidente Donald Trump, solicitamos que se le exonerara porque es un preso de conciencia, es injustamente tratado. Su delito, entre comillas, fue denunciar violaciones graves de derechos humanos en el mundo, y además intromisión de el gobierno de Estados Unidos en asuntos internos de otros países. Eso fue lo que hizo Assange. Es el mejor periodista de nuestro tiempo en el mundo y ha sido muy injustamente, repito, tratado, peor que delincuente. Esto es una vergüenza para el mundo. Recogió los cables, los informes de embajadas de Estados Unidos, en donde se hablaba de actos de intervencionismo y de crímenes cometidos, de flagrantes violaciones a derechos humanos. No solo textos, sino imágenes. Lleva ya muchos años preso. Yo esperaba que la justicia en el Reino Unido lo protegiera, Sin embargo, fue muy decepcionante el que lo estén enviando a Estados Unidos, condenarlo a vivir de por vida o estar de por vida en la cárcel, enjuiciado. Entonces, ¿y las libertades? ¿Vamos a quitar la Estatua de la Libertad de Nueva York? ¿Vamos a seguir hablando de democracia? ¿Vamos a seguir hablando de protección a los derechos humanos? ¿De libertad de expresión? Yo quiero plantear que sí voy a pedir al presidente Biden que se atienda este asunto. Estoy consciente de que va en contra de grupos duros, severos, que hay en Estados Unidos como en todos los países, pero también debe de prevalecer el humanismo. México le abre las puertas a Assange. Me gustaría antes que, a ver si conseguimos una imagen de la información que se difundió a través de esta investigación de Assange sobre cómo se asesinó a unos periodistas. Entonces, esto es lo que produjo la persecución. Naciones Unidas debe pronunciarse, todas las organizaciones de defensa de derechos humanos. No puede haber silencio. Sí, de unos pilotos, la conversación, están viendo un grupo y se están poniendo de acuerdo para disparar. Pero son periodistas los que fueron blanco. Esto es por lo que está y hay muchas otras informaciones.